All right. I think I'm live. I hope I'm live. It did something really weird earlier and asked me to log in, but I don't actually know if I needed to log in or if I'm live right now. Oh boy. Oh, I am live. Awesome. Okay. Needed to double check. Well, welcome everybody to 2024 and a brand new block of the month. I'm Sherry Shish with Powered by Quilting, and we are working on Wish. So this is a brand new block of the month. You can actually just see the nice picture here. I have a mock-up of this quilt and actually a sample of this quilt, but it is currently out on a trunk show somewhere in the US that I don't remember. I need to go check my records. But we are working on month 1. So for those of you that have never done a block of the month with me before, this is a 6-month block of the month. Most of my other ones, Barn Quilt, Wave Pool, Summer Delight, all 6 months. The only one, Lucky Stars, is 9. And then I had a couple on Twitch and on Patreon that were 12-month ones. But this is a 6-month block of the month. In true Sherry fashion, month 1 is very long because what I want to happen is that you go through your 6 months, and if you get behind, you have time to catch up. So month 1 is typically longer than the rest. And what we're going to do today is we are going to use fabrics colors A, B, and C. And what you kind of already seen is I've already cut some of them in half. So in the instructions, you are going to have page 1, which is kind of your fabric instructions, general instructions. Page 2 is your swatch. So if you are not using a kit and you are using your own colors, make sure you use the swatch page so you remember what fabric is which. And the instructions today are on page 3 and on page 4. You're going to be cutting quite a few squares in each of the different fabrics, and fabric A, fabric B, fabric C, and background. And you will be cutting a lot of those squares in half to make these triangles, okay? We are going to be making these 2 blocks, the kind of these corner blocks today, I believe, I think it's these 2 blocks. And what I'm going to do first, because I didn't cut everything in half, I wanted to kind of show you guys what we do on stream. So typically how I do this, so you're going to do your normal fold of fabric, you're going to cut your width, you're going to cut your squares, okay? So typically I do it then. I don't usually stack my squares because once you start stacking, your fabric kind of gets a little bit off center. But you want to make sure if you're going to cut these later that you have all of your fabrics very square with each other. And then you're going to use a ruler and you are going to go from corner to corner, okay? Before you go and cut all the way down to be able to have those triangles, okay? Now for the first block that we're going to be doing, we are going to be making a square and a square block. Sure I know which ones I'm doing, and it's going to be a white square, and what we're going to do is we are going to add in 4 of these wonderful cut triangles, okay? We're going to make a square and a square. So sometimes there's 2 different ways you can make a square and a square. You can make a snowball, which is a square, and a square, like you put a square on you may have, pretend this is a big square, you put this here and you sew along the diagonal, trim, and you press open. That is a snowball corner. We are actually going to sew our triangles on that center square and then trim it back down to the correct size. So that brings me to a good point. So I forgot to do intros on what tools that you're going to need to make this quilt. I use Clearly Perfect angles on my machine, so you can kind of see it. It's this kind of green and clear. You kind of see other pieces of tape for just measurements for me, but it looks like this. Clearly perfect angles. I use this for everything. This helps me not mark any of my half square triangles, hourglass blocks, anything I need to sew across the diagonal. The second thing that you'll probably need are your clearly slotted trimmers. So trimmer A, which is this size, and trimmer A2, which is a bigger size. All right, so we're gonna have some pretty big half square triangles coming up later. So A and A2. And then I also like Grippy. I don't have that handy, but Grippy is a spray that you use for the back of these rulers to make them catch on the fabric, so it's not so dangerous to use. And then the last thing I would say would be super helpful, if I can get it out, because you're going to need it this week, is your Cute Cuts ruler. So this is a Cute Cuts ruler. I need a piece of white. So this is what it looks like. And it's because you have your 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. So it's just marking, and you kind of can center where your block needs to be when you trim it, okay? All right. So back to square and square. And we are going to be sewing these onto that center square. Now you're probably saying, hey Sherry, what do I do? Because these corners are much longer than this square. So if I like sew it here, I have such a large piece. Like, why is that? Well, what I do is I oversize my corner pieces so you can trim it back down. This makes this pattern a little bit more user-friendly and a little bit quicker and easier, so you're not having to be 100% precise when you're sewing. But easy ways to get your piece to be aligned in the center. I like to take my triangle and I like to fold it in half. You can hit it with an iron if you want, but you can also just finger press this in half so you have a center line, okay? And what you're gonna do is you're going to align and go right sides together and have the edge of your line here and your point touch that line. Your point of the triangle is going to be on that line. Your raw edge of that triangle is going to be here, and I'm going to sew this down across this edge at a 1/4 inch. I really need to get a new one of those, but I'm lazy and I like mine. So, okay, so I sewed that down. And before I go and press this open, which I can do, I can finger press this now, I'm going to sew the other side because that same seam line or that same center line works for both left and right. All right, so like so. And now I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch down, a 1/4 inch seam down. All right, so now I'm going to take this to the iron and I'm going to press everything open like so. And you're probably like, okay, cool, Sherry, got it. I can do that. Now I got to sew the top and the bottom and like, where the heck do I do that? Like, how do I know where these are? Well, just like we did the fold for this center, we're going to fold these together here in the center and mark it. So you're going to want to align your seam lines together, right? So you're not like overly folding one way or the other. You're going to fold that to find the center here because you don't really want it to be like this way or like that. You want them on top of each other to get that center line. And you're going to do that same thing where you're going to say, okay, so that center line is here. I'm going to have my point on the center line and my long edge along here. And I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch across. All right, so that is side number 3. And again, not going to go press because once I press, that line's going to kind of go away. And then, so I'm going to do this again, align my point with the line, align my long edge with the side of the piece, and I'm going to sew down a 1/4 inch seam. So now that we have that, we are going to go ahead and press my seams open. So we're going to look at a square and a square. Woo! Like, this is so amazing. We're done. Or are we? This piece is massive comparatively to this block, okay? So we're going to trim this block down. And I'm going to first show you how to use a cute cuts ruler to trim it, and then I'm going to show you how to trim it with, say, a 6.5, or actually this is 5.5, but a 6.5 inch ruler. So I'm going to show you how to do both of those. All right. So for your cute cuts, I'm actually going to do this on the white so you can see it. You want your point for your center squares to hit on this intersection between that 1/4 inch seam allowance and the number 2 on all 4 corners, okay? Personally, for me, I like only cutting 2 of the sides and then using a normal ruler to cut the other 2 sides. Partly because if you don't have a spinning mat, you have to cut all 4 sides of this block, and spinning the piece with the ruler is kind of hard. So I only cut 2, and then I'm going to use my normal ruler to cut the other 2 sides by measuring my 1/4 inch, or my 4.5 inch square. So that is how we trim that up. Ta-da! All right, so you're going to be making a whole bunch of these, so I made a couple more. So I have one here that we're going to trim with my normal 4.5 inch ruler, or 6.5 inch ruler, sorry, 6.5. So here we have our fun 1/4 inch seam lines that we are going to go ahead and place on here. Okay. So now the question is, how the heck do we do this, right? So we probably, maybe we do it this way. It's going to be a little tricky because you want your pieces to intersect at the point of which you have a 1/4 inch on all 4 sides of that point. So you're going to have to either mark them on your ruler, or you're going to have to get a 1/4 inch ruler or something smaller, because this side you can't really see because of where this is. So you're going to have to just be able to say, okay, at 2.25 inches, right, is where that line should be. 2.25 inches is where that line should be. 2.25, 2.25, right? So like, or 4.25. So there's a level of finagling. Now if you have a 4.5 inch ruler, it's a little bit easier because you have your little like white lines in the middle. The 6.5 is probably the hardest to do because you can't see where you're going. So just so you know, 6.5 inch ruler will be a little bit frustrating. You're going to have to utilize your lines, and I would mark on your ruler on where you're going. So on these clear acrylic rulers, you can use something like a quick metallic Sharpie dots, because those will wipe off eventually. Or just get a 4.5 inch ruler, which I'm going to do this here because it is easier. But I would highly recommend you getting one of those if you don't have one. And then if you don't, mark on your ruler where you're supposed to be for your dots, because that will help you then measure and line up where those dots are supposed to be hitting those square to squares. Okay? All right. So now that we have those, you are going to be making a ton of them. So you will be making a lot of these, which is background and fabric A. You're going to be making some that are, where did I put them? Background and fabric C. See, I made a couple of these. And then you are also going to be making some fabric B and background pieces. And you're also going to be making some background B and some half background and half fabric A. So you have 4 different types that you're going to make a whole bunch, okay? I already made them because you don't need to sit there and watch me make these square and squares. And we are going to first put together our first block. So block 1A, okay? That block is this corner block right here, this corner block. That is month A, okay? And so what we're gonna do, I'm gonna put the together a design board here, and we are going to say this is going to go here. 5. So you're going to use your fabric B with background corners, so you have 5. And then the block that we just made, which is the white background with fabric A corners, go on the other 4. Okay, so it's going to look like this. You are going to end up making 4 of these blocks, so you're going to make a lot of these square and a square, so you'll get perfectly good at them. In order to make this block together, what we're going to do is we're going to web piece this block together. So column 1, column 2, column 3. We're going to sew column 1 and column 2 together and then add in column 3. So then we have our rows sewn together. Then we're going to press, and then we're going to sew the long seams together. But we're not going to cut the thread in between all of the pieces. That way we have them webbed together and then they don't fall apart. Okay? All right, so column 1 and column 2, we effectively now have 4.5 inch squares because they're all trimmed nice and even. And we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. That's 1. That's 2. So we have column 1 and column 2. We're going to now open this like so, and we're going to add in our next unit. Okay. Surprisingly, I actually like making square and a square units this way a little bit better. I feel like it takes a little bit more work than a snowball square and a square. However, I feel like my snowballs don't always come out perfect. Whereas this square and a square method, in my opinion, my pieces, because you trim everything down to 4.5 inches square, are pretty darn perfect every single time. This is your block so far, right? Everything is webbed together. You can't really drop it. I'm going to go press everything to the darker units, so the background with A corners, just because, in my opinion, that's the darker side. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then what we're going to do is now we're going to sew the long edges together to make the block. Now everything is nice and flat. We're going to fold this over like so. And we're going to pin our seams because there are seam nests right here. And we're going to sew along that long edge. I use clover fork pins to pin on either side of the seam. The only thing that you'll want to do is make sure you don't go super fast over your pins and you go nice and easy and slow. I do sew over these pins. Very rarely do I break a needle. I broke one actually earlier today. But it was partly because I went too fast over the pin and I had a really, really thick, bulky section. If you go nice and slow over these pins, they'll just slide right over. So take the pins out and I will go ahead and rotate and flip and pin the other side as well. voila. And now we're gonna press this block. And you are gonna make 4 of these, because these are the corners of the wish block. All right. Ta-da! That is block A. Now block B, so you have 2 blocks to make this month. Block A, finished. Block B, we have 1 other unit. So we are using the white with fabric C, and we're using the B with A and background. Those are in block C, but we also have 4 more units that we need to make this block. For this one, we're gonna use our small square, and we're gonna use the smaller of the fabric A pieces. And we're gonna sew something that looks like this, okay? So how do you do that? First of all, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to sew this piece on like so, right? So I'm gonna line up the corners with the square, and I'm gonna sew down 1/4 inch, okay? And in this piece in particular, I will be pressing everything because there's no, like, I can't add the other piece without pressing this one first. Okay, so I have that here. And then my next piece, I'm going to flip this up and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch down this way. Okay. This piece. Now there is one thing I didn't put in the pattern itself here, is that we do have dog ears kind of in the middle. Like right here. So what I'll do is I'll take some scissors and I'll just cut them off because you don't really need them and they're kind of in the way. Okay. So now we have a half square triangle, and we have these really nice big half square triangles as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to align my half square triangle with the other half square triangle. Notice that they're not 100% aligned. The way that you want to sew this is you want to sew 1/4 inch away from the purple, like, oh my goodness, they're both purple, the big half square triangle, the one that you didn't have to add. So I'm going to sew 1/4 inch away on the light purple, the one that I put on top. Okay. One thing to be very careful about if you are not using a quilt kit and you are using normal quilting fabric, those diagonals are on the biased edge, okay? Meaning that they will be stretchy. Batik fabric, not as stretchy, okay? So just know that that's a thing. And then here, what we do is we'll go through and trim this up. Okay. All right. And if by magic, we had another couple. I think that's 3, 4. Okay, perfect. All right. Magic. All right, so now we're going to put this block together. And these units, I'm going to put this over here so you can see it. These units are now our corners of our block, like so. This will be our center, and these are going to be our edges. Okay. So we make this really nice white star in the middle. Okay. So again, we have a 3x3 block now. We're going to do the same block assembly as we did with block A, and we're going to do web piecing. So column 1, 2, and 3. You're going to sew column 2 to column 1, add column 3 over, press your seams, and then you're going to sew the long edges. Okay. open this one back up. We're not cutting anything, and we're going to add in the other side. Okay. So now our block looks like this. It's sewn together, but not quite together. It's just the rows are sewn together. Same thing as before, we're going to fold the row 1 and row 2 together, we're going to pin it, and then we're going to sew those 2 rows together. Then we're going to pin what you just sewed to row 3, and sew that last long seam together. Press open these seams. We're good to go. Here is month 1, block 2, or block B. So you have A and B, and you're going to be making 4 and 4 of each of these blocks. That is it for month 1. I will be back on stream here live at 12 o'clock Central Time on February 17th to work on month 2. Hope to see you then. And then if you are wanting a quilt kit, the link is down below and the PDF pattern is down below as well. You can make this exact quilt with me. Again, the background in the quilt kits will be white versus the almond, but I'm making this one in white this time. So have a great day, and I'll see you next month. Bye-bye.